Hello everyone, my name is Emma. This is my channel, Red Pork Pad Thai, and today I'm going to be working on a little gouache painting. I kind of just wanted to experiment the other day, and I remembered that I had this great Himi Gouache set, and so I busted that out real quick, real easy to reactivate. A lot of the paints were still wet, and I just kind of sat down and went to work and was finished with it pretty quickly that evening. And I will show you a little bit of that process. One of the first things I did is I went ahead and grabbed a bunch of my supplies that I was thinking about using. You can see there I had some watercolor pencils, which I very quickly realized I did not want to use with the gouache. Here I'm starting with some sketches. I started with this kind of like elf lady with very geometric hair, but it ended up being more of a bust drawing, and I was thinking of doing more of a portrait. So I ended up sketching the next one again here. I ended up liking that sketch pretty okay. You'll see here I wrote that it kind of reminded me of Marcus from Detroit Become Human, but I didn't exactly want to look like that actor, but it did influence how I ended up drawing the final drawing. And then the last little sketch that I did, I was kind of going for, I have the little Selkie character that I do. He's a very kind of, not trapezoid, I guess more of like an octagon shaped head, but I very quickly did not like that sketch, just skipped right over it. I moved on to the final sketch. Normally I do a lot more kind of iterative sketches on the same idea, but this was already pretty late at night and I just kind of wanted to, like I said, experiment. Wasn't too worried about making a terribly good drawing. I just kind of wanted to lay some paint down and see what happened. Here I'm going in and taping my paper to the board that is artist's tape, and that's really important. Sometimes I have like wall masking tape, but you gotta be really careful with your nice watercolor paper, even with this artist quality tape, because it can peel up a bit of the paper, and I was so close when I was peeling it. You'll see later, right in one of the very corners, I ended up peeling a little bit of the surface of the paper, but every single other portion of it actually peeled away really, really easily, which is kind of unusual because I usually end up destroying the paper. And so here in the sketch, since I had kind of had this image of Jesse Williams in my head, while I didn't want it to look like the actor, I ended up really liking the sketch. Again, I was just kind of creating little thumbnails, and I just wanted it to be a quick little thing to experiment on and laying some paint down. But I found that by the time I finished the sketch, I was actually a lot more pleased with it than I thought I was going to be. So I was a little nervous to actually start adding paint to the surface of the painting. And you'll see here in a second, I went and did some research on my iPad because I needed a reference for the skin tones, because I'm not used to painting people with darker skin tones. So I was looking at some of those kind of like artist, like little, I don't know, like globe or circle references. And then I also ended up going on to Instagram and checking some of the tags to look at people with the skin tones that I was trying to paint, just to kind of get an idea of how I need to apply the paint, and what kind of transitions I was looking for. And I ended up settling on this lovely image of a woman with really curly hair. She had very kind of it was very like light almond color on the cheeks, and then it transitioned into this very deep red around her cheekbones, and then it transitioned into very dark kind of brown along the edges of her chin. Very editorial lighting scenario that I went with, because I was looking for something that was high contrast. And here you'll see that I start mixing green first, which may surprise some people, unless you've studied the history of art at all. This is definitely a Renaissance technique. You see it a lot in religious Renaissance artwork. In fact, some of the restored pieces that I saw when I was in Italy, you can tell that during the restoration they took away a little bit too much of those top glazes, and you can see a lot more of the green underpainting, which is kind of fascinating to look at as an art historian. So I started with this green underpainting, and the reason I did that, and the reason that we've historically done that in painting for hundreds of years, is because green is the complementary color of red. And instead of just going straight in with red and orange kind of skin tones, you use green to help neutralize it a bit. and that will help make it look a lot more like a natural skin tone. Because it neutralizes some of that saturation in the paint, and I think it really helps balance the colors out and creates more of like a glow effect. So I was thinking when I first started painting this that I wanted to use these kind of big blocky strokes, as I've seen some artists do in gouache. I'm really bad at applying gouache. Some people use it, they say, people say that it's kind of like an in-between watercolor and acrylic, and I've seen some people apply gouache in a very kind of acrylic painterly way, and I really, really like the aesthetic of that, but I have a hard time wrapping my brain around how to actually execute that. I knew a lot of people went in with like a large flat brush, so that's what I started doing, but I found that I didn't have the control that I want. Part of the issue is that this is a really small painting, and using this technique on such a small surface just isn't really viable. So I got frustrated pretty quickly, and you can see here I switched to a round brush just to kind of help control the paint a bit more so that I wasn't just putting it everywhere. Like there along the jaw and cheekbone was kind of a mess, but you'll see I go over it so many times to help try to fix it here. Here I'm going in with kind of more medium tones and kind of layering them. Especially in painting, it kind of looks like a hot mess until the very end. You'll notice that I've also painted the hair portion green as well, and that's because I was going to use a really rich, warm brown for that. And I knew that I wanted, again, to have that kind of, I didn't want it to look too red. I wanted to have I wanted it to feel like a naturally occurring brown, so I needed to kind of neutralize it a bit. And here you can see I'm actually adding that paint, very kind of rich brown. And I think immediately, because I only really had that kind of really yellow and the really orange colors going on the face, and adding that contrast immediately started helping with the overall structure, I think. I think this is the point where the eyes looked the best, and then I kept going over them and ruining them, partly because there just wasn't enough contrast overall, and while it looks great on screen, in person, I was having a lot of difficulties really making the eyes pop, because that is the portion of the face that we tend to engage the most with, and I definitely wanted that to be the place where people's attention was focusing on the face. And one of the things I was thinking about through all this is, like, as much as this is kind of like a naturalistically painted, or I'm using quote-unquote kind of realistic style of painting, the sketch is very much a very cartoony style, very much in my style, as much as I didn't mean for it to be, but I was just sketching, I wasn't looking at reference or anything. So the features are still very cartoony. His eyes are very much far too large. The eyebrows are quite large and long, and take up most of the width of his face, and try to create a balance between this very realistic painting and these very stylized features. And the reference that I was using, again, because of the editorial lighting, they really pushed the darks, so her chin was kind of blending in with her neck, and I was kind of trying to do that here, but I found with the lighting situation that I had, it kind of ruined some of the depth in the character's face, because, again, this isn't the exact same lighting setup or pose or anything as the reference that I was using for colors, and so I kept trying to leave a little bit of that light along the jaw just to help it stand out from the neck, to keep him from looking like his head and his neck are just like one flat plane. Slowly adding more and more depth, and adding kind of darker tones, and I think that really helps push the front of the face forward, and the sides of the face back, and creates a lot more depth in the face overall. And here, I added some detail off camera. My battery died. And here I've already added some details real quick off camera, and I was going to record filming the background, and you see I'm mixing that dark blue, and then it just didn't record it for some reason. But I did decide I needed another layer. I wanted this very kind of dark blue, and the first layer was okay, but I really needed like a second layer to make it look more flat and matte, and to not see the brushstrokes as bad as I could before. And so I'm just going in, layering it very evenly, one stroke after another, kind of stroking out where the paint overlaps, to create a nice even effect here. And I knew I wanted this really dark blue to help contrast with the really warm colors in the face. And this can kind of go wrong sometimes because it ends up making the colors in the face look more saturated if they're concentrated against a color that they contrast with. But I knew that's what I wanted, and I still think it turned out really good. And here I'm adding the mustard yellow, this kind of mustard yellow color to the shirt. I did the background first because I didn't know what color I wanted the shirt to be. Painted the shirt afterwards, and after I did, I felt like I had a very Star Trek vibe. It kind of looks like, I think yellow are engineers. It's originally green, technically, but don't quote me on that. I'm a bad Star Trek fan. And again, I go in with another layer just because I'm not super happy with the coverage. And that's just all in my application. I tend to work very, very wet, and gouache is I think meant to be used in a more painterly way, and that's something that I definitely struggle with. Here I'm finally peeling the tape. You can see, as I'm peeling the tape, it's peeling off some of the cardboard that I have this painting taped to. So I'm being really, really careful, pulling at an angle so that there's a lot of surface area being pulled away at once. It's very slow because I want to make sure, again, that I don't tear up the edge of that paper. And literally, like, the second to last one, if not, no, it was the very, very last one, that corner, I tore off some of the paper, and I was so frustrated because it was the last one, and I was so close. And here I'm realizing that, oh yeah, I forgot, because I did this blue background, I wanted to have these kind of really cool light blue highlights, some kind of backlighting for the character to help him pop from the background more, especially since, the left side of the body, or I guess his right, is very dark. I wanted to have some contrast between him and the background. And so after I've after I've already taken this painting off of the board that I had it mounted to, I went ahead and added some paint, which I don't recommend. I was adding a very, very little amount, but generally you always want to keep your painting attached to the board that it's on until you are absolutely done, because you don't want to create any warping in the paper by getting it wet again. And I will show you what the final painting looks like here in just a second. But first, let's take a quick break for tea. Today's tea selection is brought to you by Twinings. It's a green tea, something very relaxing and soothing. And our book recommendation for today, in honor of Black History Month, is Ta-Nehisi Coates' We Were 8 Years in Power. This book is about the 8 years of the Barack Obama presidency and how that created a lot of social capital and opportunities for Black people in America, and how a lot of that was stripped away after Trump was elected, and how we've entered an era of white supremacy following the Barack Obama presidency. And I had the great privilege of seeing him speak when he was in Kansas City. He is an incredibly charismatic speaker, and some of his videos are available online on YouTube if you want to watch before you read his books. So that is my recommendation for this video. He also has a number of other books, can't recommend him enough. This book, and as well as the tea, will be available in links down below. And some final thoughts on the Himi Gouache. I've had it for over a year now. I don't tend to paint, I tend to paint in watercolor more than gouache, but I was really feeling that this time, so I went ahead and pulled it out. As you can see, I'm like testing the softness again. I left this out overnight, and the painting was still plenty soft. And again, a lot of the paints are still wet, so very, very easy to just pick up some paint and go. The cool thing about this set is that, unlike a lot of watercolor gouache sets where you just get little tubes, this one comes in its own palette. So it also has 2 full-size palettes, and they snap onto the top to create a seal. I've seen some people, if you really want to keep your paints like really, really wet, they will put saran wrap over the top and then seal it. I find that mine have stayed wet for at least a year. I've moved with them. They've been in all kinds of different temperature scenarios, and they're still pretty wet. So, and if you'd like to get your own Himi Gouache set, I do have those linked below. They have a mint palette, and they also have a pink palette. They do have extended palettes as well that come with paintbrushes and stuff, but they're a little bit more expensive. And I will have those linked for you down below. Alrighty, and here is the final painting, all finished and done. I do have these available as little 5x7 prints in my shop. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and I will see you all in the next one. recording a video right now. Can you hop down real quick? I'm still recording.